However, when Adam and Eve sinned, death came on all. And death comes to all. And it comes to many in infancy and childhood. I suppose it would be an educated guess to say that perhaps half of the people ever conceived die before they reach any level of maturity. And again, I ask the question, how does God deal with them? Is the answer comforting? Is the answer encouraging? Is the answer hopeful? Or is it discouraging? Do they go instantly to heaven? Why did I say that? I'm not the first one to try to deal with this, but there are a lot of people who aren't dealing with it today. I was on a panel at a conference, a large conference, with 3 other pastors, and it was a question and answer panel, and I was sitting up there with these other very fine pastors whom I love and respect. And one of the questions came from the audience was, what happens to babies that die? And they went down the first 3. And the answer in each case was, I don't know, which isn't very comforting. And it puts me in a terrible spot because when they came to me, I said, they go to heaven. They go to heaven. And I tried to give a brief explanation of why I believe that's true. But I thought, as I've looked back on that so many times, how can you be a pastor and not get an answer to that question? Because you're dealing with people constantly who go through this. Even C.S. Lewis agreed with me. Now, he didn't know it. C.S. Lewis, in his wonderful book, The Last Battle, wrote about a terrible train accident, one of those terrible disasters that killed all the children in a family. And that surfaced the question, what about those children? As any disaster does. This is what he wrote. And as God spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. Remember, he pictures God as a lion, Aslan. He said, as God spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all stories, and we can say most truly that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world had only been the cover of the title page. Now, at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. End quote. That's the inimitable C.S. Lewis, saying that they were ushered into the real story. Now, that's prose, I know, but it's true, isn't it? It's right, isn't it? To tell parents when children die, they do live happily ever after. I think the Word of God will affirm the salvation of little ones who die. A place to begin, Psalm 139. Psalm 139. What I'm going to do tonight is just give you a little bit of a look at Psalm 139. Then I want to talk a little theology with you, and I'm going to be as precise as I can because this demands precision. And then next Sunday night, I'm going to support the theology with the text of various scriptures. So this will be a 2-part look at this issue. Psalm 139 does provide for us a good starting place. I want you to look at verse 17. This is a place to launch our look, and then we're going to go backwards in this first part of Psalm 139. How precious also are thy thoughts to me, O God. How vast is the sum of them. The psalmist David has captured some precious thoughts here. Precious divine truths that mean so much to him. That's why he calls them precious. They are treasured truths. They are gems to hold on to. And what are they? Let's go back and find out. First precious truth that the psalmist grips is that God knows everything about him even before he could talk. Look at verse 1. O Lord, Thou hast searched me and known me. Thou dost know when I sit down, when I rise up. Thou dost understand my thought from afar. Thou dost scrutinize my path and my lying down, and art acquainted intimately with all my ways. You know everything about me. Everything about me. You know me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up. In other words, you know every detail of every moment of every day. You know what I think. You know my path. You know my sleeping. You know everything intimately about all my ways, and you have known it even before there is a word in my tongue. Before I could ever speak, you knew everything about me. I was known to you in every element of my life. Behold, O Lord, you know it all. God knows everything about me, even before I can talk. The second precious truth is that God is actively involved in my life. Verse 5, you have enclosed me behind and before. You've laid your hand on me. In other words, you got me backed up on both sides and covered on top. You're active in my life. I'm in the middle, and you've got me surrounded. Verse 6, he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I can't attain it. You know everything about me before I can speak. You have my life completely in your hands. You've pressured me from both sides. You've kept me contained. I can't get out the top because you're there. It's a precious truth, isn't it? From the very start, you're actively involved in controlling my life. Third precious thought is that God will never lose sight of or knowledge of me. There's no way I can ever be lost to you. Where can I go from your Spirit? Verse 7, where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there thy hand will lead me, thy right hand will lay hold of me. I can't go anywhere outside of your knowledge. I can't go anywhere outside of your vision. I will never be lost to you. The fourth precious truth is that God will never be limited in that knowledge, no matter how dark it gets. I mean, this is sort of metaphoric language in a sense. It's never going to be so dark. You say, well, I could see you in the light, but things might get so dark that God loses his view. No, he says in verse 11 and 12, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, I might say, and the light around me will be night. In other words, I'm going to fall into some circumstance. I'm going to fall into some problem, some dilemma, some condition, and it's going to be so dark, the Lord isn't going to be able to find me. And then verse 12, he says, even the darkness is not dark to thee. The night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to thee. Now, the point of this is these are incredibly precious thoughts of the psalmist. And what they tell us is that God knows every single detail about his life from beginning to end, starting before he could ever say a word. How is it that God has this personal, intimate knowledge? Answer, because God is, and here's the fifth precious thought, God is his personal creator. Verse 13, for thou didst form my inward parts. Thou didst weave me in my mother's womb. You put together the male chromosomes and the female chromosomes. You wove my DNA. You made me personally. And the sixth precious thought is in verse 16. You determined my destiny. You planned my life. Thine eyes have seen my unformed substance. You saw me in your sovereign view before I was ever formed. And in your book, everything about me was written down. The days that were ordained for me when as yet there wasn't one of them. Now, these are precious thoughts. God knows everything about me even before I can talk. God is in complete control of my life. God will never lose sight of me no matter what goes on. I can never be lost to God. There is no circumstance